Hi folks, Roach here in the woodshop. I named this program after a movie that came out in 1982 starring Jeff Bridges. It was a Walt Disney film and it was called TrØn. If you haven't seen the movie, it's got a great message and it relates a little bit how I am and what my function is. It's a good movie. It has a great message, and it's got all this conflict and light show. It was the first of its kind, so it is actually kind of unique. So if you haven't seen it, it is worth a look. So you can understand a little bit more about me and what it is that I do. So let's get started. First, we're going to talk about where you're at, what you are, and what you're not. And we're going to talk about a primary choice that you've made in your life. Now, when I first started out, I really didn't have anybody that was there to show me what was really going on. Most of the people around me, they learned from their parents and they learned from their parents. So there wasn't a lot of people that could really show me, what was really going on. And the biggest mistake that I make is sort of like in the Tron movie. I mean, they set up these opposites, and you have to fight against them. Uh, Now, when I look back, there weren't any real enemies. It was just me against myself, and the others that I saw in my life experience weren't really my enemies. They were actually my friends, and they were actually showing me some things that I needed to learn about myself. And that's true for where most of us are at right now, although most of us don't really see it that way. They look at, all of the things around them and, all of the government entities and all of the groups of people, and there's a lot of conflict. But those are not your enemies. Okay, those are actually your friends, and most especially the people that are here that we think are controlling everything. Okay, they are not bad men. They're not evil men. They're trying to show you something important because you made a choice when you were really small, and you're living out that choice. Now, at any time, you can rethink that choice and try something different. So what you're going through right now is I could be characterized as entertainment. Now, with that entertainment, there's an amount of stress, the discomfort, pain, and sometimes even we end up doing things that actually cause us to leave the simulation. All right? So the first thing that we need to understand is what it means to be human. Okay, human is a physical form. Okay, it is this flesh suit. Okay, it has tools to perceive the universe. It has eyes, it has ears. In most cases, some people have chosen a more challenging experience. Okay, so they've come into the world with they're missing parts or things don't quite work the way it would usually work for most people. There's nothing wrong with that. All that means is that's just a more challenging experience. It's not run of the mill. It's out of the ordinary. It's special. It's even more special than most of our experiences because we don't have those same challenges, and it makes them different, makes them unique, and a lot of the times they learn things that somebody who does not have those challenges never have to even face. So from that perspective, these people that have these, we call them disabilities, but they're really not disabilities. It just sets up their environment just a little bit different. Their tool is just different from ours, and they're learning different lessons because you came here to do specifically what it was that you needed to do here, and I'm doing what I needed to do here, and everybody does that, and we all do this together, and to be human, right, is just to be a form, just a form, an identity, a physical thing. Okay, there's nothing special about it. Okay, it's actually looking at that is actually very limiting. Now, there are people that actually live their whole lives and think that they're just this machine. And it's a biological machine. It's very complex. It has, standard instinctual aspects to it. It has emotional aspects to it, psychological, mental. I mean, it has the capacity for memory. It stores things in a history for you, not always accurately, but for the most part, it's pretty useful. It has its own defense mechanisms. I mean, if it perceives if the machine perceives that it's in danger, it'll create fear, and then it acts on that fear. Okay, and that fear actually brings about a lot of the more constructive aspects of our life experience. However, there is another part, and it's called the being. Okay, the being is the thing that watches out through your eyes. That being may or may not be paying attention. Okay, if it's not paying attention, then for the most part, it's a strictly human experience, and it's usually uncomfortable. So if your experience right now is uncomfortable, and let's just say you don't like it, and you've made a value judgment that you don't want to continue being that way, or existing that way, then I would suggest that you learn the other half of the human being equation, and that is the being part. Now, when we start out and we're young, most of us are born to parents who know how to be human. And once in a while, they're a being. Okay, they have these moments where they have a particular event that gives them a particular insight. But most of us don't have anybody who can really rely on to teach us how to be a being. Okay, so we're stuck. We're stuck, and we're stuck on purpose because most of us are here to actually learn the uncomfortable lessons and have that demonstrated to us. And a lot of the times, as a being, you don't have near the amount of stress and discomfort. You're actually happy. There is a state of bliss that comes from being a being, and a lot of people, they want the discomfort. They want the excitement. It's like a roller coaster. It's got to be scary. That's not to say there aren't good parts of being strictly human. But eventually, what happens is it's enough. You've learned what you needed to learn from suffering and pain and discomfort. Sometimes yeah, for a lot of people, that's all they get. Okay, they only came here for the human part. However, there are others in this population of on Earth that had parents that knew the difference between human and being. Okay, and they were able to pass that information on to their children. Okay, now you really can't tell the difference just by looking at them. They don't look any different because, of course, everybody has the same flesh suit. But you can usually tell in their eyes because it looks like somebody's awake in there. And somebody's actually paying attention to what's going on. And they have eyes that look right through you. And you know who these people are. And they're soft-spoken, and they're generally happy, nice, patient, peaceful folks. They really don't need conflict because they're not playing that particular game. There is a nice aspect to being a being, and that is that it comes with some nice extra stuff. One, you don't have to sit there and move the flesh suit around, because once you're a being, you realize that the flesh suit moves around all by itself. I mean, the words just come right on out automatically. So the being just sits back and watches. Now, if you're that being, it becomes a movie, or a documentary, or anything. It could even be as exciting as it was as being a human. It's just that it doesn't come with all of that negative emotional attachment. And when you look at other human forms that are in this life simulation, it doesn't feel bad, and you don't look at these others. You know what they are. There's actually beings inside these forms, although most of them don't choose to be that way. And I say it's a choice, because it is up to you. When you decide that you want to have be a being, then you get to be responsible. Okay, and responsibility as a human is different from a responsibility as a being. As a human, you're responsible for everything that you do. So every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and it follows the golden rule. If you do to somebody else, then you can expect that to be done to you, and it's all your fault. Okay? So as a being, it's a little bit different. Okay? You're responsible for what you do because you're in a human form. You're also responsible for everything that's done to you. Well, why is that? Well, as a human, you look at others as separate from you. Okay? As a being, you know that there's just one being in a bunch of different bodies like this. As a being, you don't see those others as others. They're you. They're just a reflection of you, and this body is a reflection of that other when they're looking out. So you have all of these. You have one being looking out of these little view portholes that we call the human form. Okay, so that responsibility is different, right? Now, when you understand this, then you say, "Hey, wait a minute. I'm not doing this. That guy is not hurting me. I need that guy to hurt me because that's for my experience. Now, if I didn't need that, then it wouldn't be happening. So I have to take it real seriously. And as a being, you don't control the situation. You just simply watch and see what happens and pay attention, because life will display itself for you automatically. If you just take your hand off the joystick, the joystick itself, we think that if we turn the joystick, right, then the flesh robot moves right, or if we turn it left, the flesh robot moves left. But really, the joystick's not connected. That's a function of the human form. And it's a mechanism called ego that gives us the illusion that we're actually making the decisions. But those decisions were already made. By the time ego gets it, it's done, it's past, right? Because ego, there's a delay. The light has to hit your eyes, then it hits the back of your retina, it goes through the fluid in your eyes, then it hits the back of your eyes, then it hits the nerve, and then it goes down the nerve, and then it finally hits the brain, and then the brain has to sit there and decode it. Well, that doesn't happen instantly. Okay, there's some time. So by the time you experience it, it's already in the past. Right? So an aspect of ego is that it creates the illusion that you're in control. Because by the time a particular event is going to happen in your life, let's say, for instance, you decide to go get a bar of chocolate at the grocery store. Okay, well, in the movie, this is the part of the movie where you're going to go to the grocery store and get a chocolate bar. However, we want to, the movie is more fun if we think we're actually doing it, right? So ego then projects the idea of us wanting to go, and we call that willpower, and we think that, well, because we decided before we went to get the chocolate bar that it was somehow the idea of this flesh suit or the being inside. Well, it's really not. The flesh suit just runs a script, and ego then presents the information to the being inside in such a way to where it looks like the being is actually controlling things. But that's not a very safe way to exist. And this simulation is designed for your safety. So you only think you're in control here. Okay, when you realize, and usually that doesn't happen until you get to a particular place in your life where it's hopeless, and let's say you're destitute, and you can do nothing to help yourself. And when you completely give up, then that's when the nice things start happening, because then you realize, hey, wait a minute, then all of a sudden cool things start happening because you stop trying to control it. You just let loose because you're just desperate. I mean, and you don't know what to do. Completely take your hands off the wheel, and you notice that, hey, wait a minute, this flesh robot is moving by itself, and wow, things are now actually happening. And the more control you think you have, the less control you actually have. In fact, what you have at most is the illusion of control. That's all. It's just an illusion. And if you can just get past that and just relax and watch the movie, then you're fine. But we don't want to do that because it's that's scary. That's unknown. Right? We've never experienced that before, and this is the situation that's going on right now. We have a lot of people that we call those that think they rule, and they're in the same situation, but they're not really trying to control everything. They know that this is the big movie. We call it history, and everybody has their part to play. Everybody's special. Everybody's important. Nothing's ever forgotten. Nothing's lost. So they don't really need to control everything. Their particular bodies are in a position of doing what their bodies do, and they're not your enemies. They're not your enemies. They're just doing what they're doing, and you're doing what you're doing. And the simulation is structured to help you get past just merely being human. For most of us, we start out being human, and we have to learn how to be a being. Okay? Now, there's only one place you can learn how to do that, and that is introspection, where you look at yourself and you look at your experience and you'd really try to understand yourself, right? And they say know thyself. Well, you're not this flesh thing. However, there's a lot of suits out there that are telling you, look, you're just a biological machine. Okay, that's it. Okay, and you're just here because there was a Big Bang. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, there was a Big Bang, and then all of a sudden, all these particles started, distilling down, and they reformed. Finally, the universe cooled, and then these clumps started forming, just all on their own, and then they started generating shapes, and then there were planets and nebulae and all this other stuff, and then eventually there just happened to be this planet, and it was just in the right perfect spot, and then all of these really dicey, chancy things happened over and over and over again, and then there was this little thing that just showed up, and there was this little life, this little single-cell organism, and then it just, in the process of just being there, it just changed, and eventually we're here, and we're human beings, and that's it. And it's just one big accident, and the only reason that we think we're special is because we just happen to be conscious of it. We just happen to be in a place where that just accidentally happened. Oh, you can believe that if you want. That's fine. That's just part of that choice thing. If you want to just be human, that's not a very comfortable way to exist, because at any time, if you believe in probability, at any time, something could come out there and just knock the crap out of you. Whenever the universe decides that's the chance that, let's have an accident, right? And that doesn't help you because you're sitting here looking around, hey, what's going to happen next, and that's no existence. I mean, that's an existence of fear. Okay, you're afraid of everything. There's other bad men with guns. They're gonna come and get you. And hey, if that's part of the lesson that you want to learn. Being victimized by men with guns and stuff like that. Then that's what you're gonna get. Especially if you're afraid of it. The more you're afraid of it, then that's when those things tend to happen. Because that's what we're doing. We're learning how to deal with our fear. And the best way to surmount a particular fear is to actually experience it. And once you experience it, you say, well, it's really not that bad. I went through it. I was able to, I wouldn't want to do it again, but, hey, I can handle it. I know what to expect now. And most of our problems are unknown fears, right? Fear the unknown, where we don't know how things are going to work. So we go through certain stages where, at first, we don't know anything about the being part. Then we go through a period of suffering and suffering, and then we get to this point where we said, okay, we've had it. Okay, now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you decide that you're going to choose to be a being. That just means that you've hit a pivotal point in your life. That choice actually comes someplace else. There's a lot of people that hit these low spots in their life, and they go right back into being human. But at some point, that's enough. And the process of doing that twice, all that does is confirm that, wait a minute, no, I really don't want to do that again. Okay, so sometimes you have to practice a couple of times and try it. Oh, wait, I went that way, I hit the bottom, and then it comes back up, gets a little better, and then you hit the bottom again, and you do that, and finally you get tired of it and say, hey, that's it. There's got to be something else. So then, and generally that is just sit down in a room or sit down someplace where it's quiet in nature, and think about yourself and think about what you want. One thing, a great clue for you is asking a simple question: are you happy? And then asking the question, okay, what makes me happy? If you don't know what makes you happy, then you can't be happy, right? And don't get confused, right? All the video games, all the TV, all of that stuff, sporting events, you go to football games or baseball games or whatever it is, soccer or whatever. That's a distraction. Okay? That distracts you from actually doing stuff. Oh, it might be enjoyable to you, all right? And it may take your mind off of it. But sitting there every day, playing a video game, and not actually living your life, that's just distraction. All right, so answer those questions. Figure out what makes you happy. And if you don't, think about it. I mean, sit in a room and just sit there and wait. And if you don't know, then you don't know. I mean, after a while, you find out that the universe is actually service-oriented. Okay, so if you don't know the answers to the questions, then your life will actually show you what makes you happy. But you have to let it. That means, okay, don't be distracted. Pay attention. Okay, start paying attention, because that's really all you can do here is pay attention. It's the only duty that you have. That's the only thing you really have to pay, is to pay attention. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to think anything. You don't have to feel anything. Just pay attention. And you'll see, when you just take your hands off the joystick and you watch, you will see your life experience actually doing things for your benefit. Teaching you things, showing you things, because you've asked the question, and of course, hey, you're moving towards being a being. Okay? So being a being is to watch and learn from what you see. Well, you can't do that if you're just simply spending all your time playing a video game or watching TV, because technically the TV isn't doing anything. That's not living. And if you're watching a particular show, let's say it's a cooking show, then you watch all of these people living their lives on a cooking show, so you can sit there and watch them. And it's sort of like a human being a human on TV. All right, and you're like 3 stages removed, and what are you doing? I mean, you're probably gaining weight and unhappy, and that's it. So being a being is actually pretty important. All right, so we're looking at ourselves, and at some point we say, okay, I want to take the responsibility. And the real responsibility is you have a responsibility to pay attention. That's all you have to do. But that's the responsibility. Okay, it's an important responsibility. And when you're a being, you get your suit actually can utilize something that most people don't have, and those are rights and powers. Because if you're just paying attention, then you generally do things that are considered right, which are rights. But if you're not paying attention, if you're simply human, you tend to do things that are left or wrong. And wrong generally leads to discomfort or distraction. Okay, so and this is why you think, oh, okay, well, if I just had $20 million, then I'd be happy. I'd have all the stuff that I need. Except when you ask somebody who had nothing and then suddenly gets $20 million and find out that they're less happy than they were. Why? Because now suddenly they have this big pile of money, and then everybody's out there trying to get it, and then of course you get that extra stress, and that extra stress is just not any happy. So what you want to start out with and say, well, I want to figure out what makes me happy. And then if you do that and focus on that, then you can be happy. And it really doesn't matter what it is. Okay, it doesn't have to be something that's going to make money. You just need to figure out why that makes you happy, and the universe will provide a situation to where you can do what makes you happy, right? And still eat and have the things that you need. Okay, not necessarily the things that you want, right? If you like that, video game, you want it a whole lot, but really, do you need it? You want it, and you might even have fun playing it. But do you need it? Especially if you've done it for like 36 hours straight, and you haven't eaten, and you're just and then you come down sick, and apparently that's what you needed. But wants and needs are two different things. The nice thing about a being is that your wants actually align themselves with your needs, so that by doing what you want, you actually do what you need, and it's fun. And it's a much more pleasant experience. All right. So, how do you do that without fear? Okay. How do you get past that fear part? Okay. And who are these guys who think they run the place, or they don't think they run the place, but the humans think that they run the place. Okay. They fool themselves into thinking that, right? So I'm going to speak to what's going on here in a place that we all know of as the United States, and I'll give you an example of what it's like here to be a human, and how they actually set it up to make it look like they're like doing something like oppressing you. Okay, because one of the things that people have to understand is people cannot come and take power and rights away. Okay. That it doesn't work that way. Certainly not against your will. Okay, they don't have that power, and they know it. Okay, what they do is they set up a scenario where you decide to give those up automatically, and usually it's because you're not paying attention, right? So you have a responsibility to know where you're at, know who you are, and know those things in your environment. That's called responsibility. And responsibility is is responding properly to things in your life experience. Okay, so let's move in, and we'll start talking about what's happening in this place called the United States, and how they set up that illusion. Because once you see how that illusion is, and it doesn't matter where you are, you could be in any country, they set it up the same way. Now, the United States is kind of an interesting situation, but I do believe it has enough in it to where people can understand, how they create a perceptual environment such that you decide to give your power and your rights away. Because that's all it is. It's just a choice. Almost 2,000 years ago, there was something that actually occurred that was pretty interesting. In that there was a movement centered around what we're told is a man who began reminding us of what we are. As far as beings. He was trying to show us how to be beings again, because most people were locked in that whole idea of human. So he actually showed us how to do that, and that started creating problems for the powers that be, and these were the people that thought they ruled then. They put a name on it, and they called that the man that this event was centered around Jesus. But what Jesus actually showed us wasn't really particularly new or novel, but he was just simply reminding us of stuff that we knew a long, long time ago. And there are still people that keep all that information, and so he decided that, well, he didn't decide, it was his function to actually remind people of these elements of the law, and so people could actually return to just being instead of just a human in a state of suffering. So all of a sudden, there's this group of people that all of a sudden started being. And it was causing problems with the rest of the humans that were just being, they were just human. And those that actually set up society at that time were afraid. All right, because hey, they're doing this just like you, and anytime something new comes along, then it's unknown, so it's going to be they're going to be fearful of it, and they're going to resist it, and they did. But what they were finding out, that these guys that were walking around being, they just didn't have to suffer what the other humans would do, and they just weren't listening, and they weren't afraid. And the humans that were thinking that they were controlling things, they didn't understand that, right? So at first they started killing the beings, feeding them to lions and stuff like that, and cutting them up and crucifying them, and doing all kinds of stuff, terrible stuff. But one thing they did realize, that these people who were being, they weren't afraid of anything. And that really posed a problem, because the mechanisms, the societal mechanisms at the time, was dependent on fear to make the humans do what what they wanted the humans to do. Okay, so, and the beings were creating a problem. So and where this was going on was a place called Rome. So in 65, and I don't mean 1965, I mean in 65, the people in Rome decided that they were going to come up with a way of managing, these people. Because what they found was, once they became beings, you really couldn't do much to them. When they decided, it really created a problem. I mean, it was like a system failure. Whenever one of these people came in, then, and not only that, the worst part was, these beings could make other beings just simply by speaking, and really, the people at the top really felt threatened. So they started employing natural law, and they started and they worked out a new construct, and they call it a corporation. Okay, and corporation is like a body. But what's different about a corporation? It exists only here in your head. Okay, it's imaginary, or it's a fiction of law. Okay, and and it had several names. One of them was like corporate soul, and then and they had these different ones. And what they would do is, to lure people into describing themselves as these corporations, they would reward them, and that would entice more people into that construct. Okay, but the worst part about it was, it wasn't even human. It was dead. It was it was a piece of paper with somebody's name on it, and the laws, right, the civil laws, the contracts, all applied to the piece of paper, right? So then people said, well, hey, it's an office, right? Or a person is what they called it, right? A persona. They said, well, if there's a man in that office, then the rules apply to that physical body. Why? Because the being has decided to place himself in that person and describe himself as this thing, And largely that's because we don't know any better. We don't understand that there is a distinct difference in law, a person, a human, and a being. There's three different sides. The guy on the lowest rung is the person, because why? That actual entity exists only in our head, and all of these fictions and fictional laws apply to that person. Because if a human or a being actually does something wrong, like lies, then there are negative consequences for that, right? And you can see very directly, okay, you lie, you're lied to. Very easy for people to steal, you're stolen from, right? Real easy to figure out. However, if you don't know any better and you decide that, hey, you are a person, okay, so you are this fictional entity, right, and the rules apply to the person, then things aren't going to make sense for you, right? Because one, you're going to disconnect yourself from the law, the natural law that governs beings, and you're going to do things and it's not going to make sense to you. And this is where this whole idea of chance, luck, and accident comes from, because you can't figure out why, when you do what the rules are as a person, that it causes problems for the human. He said, well, I obeyed the rules and it said that usury was okay, and I could lie as long as I don't hurt anybody's feelings, right? That's the rules. I followed the rules. So what, why is my life shit? And then these accidents are coming, and it's because you're having that problem. Now, over time, the church actually developed the corporation, and over time, they more and more people started placing themselves in that office. So and the use of that corporation was actually kind of nice, because it caused people to make that choice, and then that way they could write any rules that they want. And of course, because natural law applied, because it was a willing choice, then the people were actually stuck in that. So come around, and in that interim time, the church was having things like an Inquisition and stuff like that, and then they decided to have a Dark Age, and that's where they really suppressed a lot of information, and they started rooting out the people who were beings, and then making deals with the people who were beings, because they, after a while, the beings didn't have to suffer what the humans were trying to do to them. They didn't have to put up with it at all. And so at the time, the Roman Empire then converted to the church, and the church actually used a principle in law called trial by combat, where they said, well, if you can't lick them, join them. Okay, so they knew they were beat, so they had to come up with a different construct. So one of the popes, Pope Boniface VIII, came up with this papal bull, and a papal bull was just a decree and a statement of law. And it was at that time the church had determined that everybody was confused. Everybody was incompetent and insane. So they said, okay, we're going to, and because these guys weren't confused, and they weren't persons, and they still understood the law, natural law, they said, okay, we have a responsibility as beings, right? Because they themselves were beings. We have a responsibility to take care of all the confused people out there. They're incompetent. They're insane. Okay, that's our responsibility. So we're going to make a deal with the thing that runs this place, and I'm not going to go into that. And they said, okay, they all are technically our responsibility. So they belong to us, and we're going to tell them what to do. So their quote-unquote souls belong to us, right? And it was a pretty good conclusion, because most people were indeed confused. Okay, they were indeed confused. The ones that were not were largely kings and people that controlled other people, that knew responsibility, and that's how it's set up. So most of us could just be confused and bounce off one another, have wars, cut each other apart, and create all that wonderful, entertaining suffering that we learned so much about. So we're going along, and wow, that was working pretty good. We had a lot of suffering, death and disease, and all kinds of, plumbed the depths of human depravity, and we learned a lot. Then all of a sudden, Columbus sailed over here to the New World. Although everybody who really knew stuff already knew that the world was round before Columbus, But since the Dark Ages, we sort of forgot those little details. So we had to relearn stuff. So come, to fast forward the story, there were some guys in in the place called the colonies, which were English colonies here in the United States, that they learned how to be a being again. And this was due to some writings that the King of England had banned. But these guys over here were actually reading the stuff and actually becoming beings. And of course, everybody back in the old country were freaking out. Oh my gosh! I mean, I thought we took care of that. Well, yeah, it was just a matter of time before people were going to be beings again. All right, so these few people, and they were like Patrick Henry, Thomas Paine, George Washington, Samuel Adams. These guys actually learned how to be beings, and they weren't afraid, because if you don't believe me, see some of the stuff that Samuel Adams was writing. I mean, he published it, put his name on it, and everybody knew he was doing it, and he wasn't afraid, right? So, cat's out of the bag again, right? So they decided, well, hey, let's create a situation. Let's see if we can get this back under containment. So they created this thing, and they call it the Republic. And it started when Thomas Paine wrote a document called the Declaration of Independence. Now, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, it has two distinct parts. Okay, one's called the preamble. If you look in the preamble, they say the God of nature. They refer to the supreme authority as the God of nature. But in the other part of the document, they refer to it as your creator. Now, what do they know that you don't know? Well, the guys at the top, who've been beings all along, knew that these bodies are tools that were manufactured specifically so the being part of us could get inside these bodies and like tools and experience this, right? But the tool itself was a manufactured tool. Okay, and it was a group of beings that came to the planet specifically under contract, right? Because it was a consortium of a whole bunch of different beings. So they built this body that had all kinds of different elements of DNA, and all kinds of different type of beings could actually come in and all call themselves human beings. All right, all call themselves human. Okay, so just put the suit on and just go. And these people were called the Anunnaki. And we wouldn't even know about the Anunnaki until a guy named Zachariah Stitchin started looking at the old Sumerian text and deciphering them, and said, they're talking about these beings that are manufacturing humans that actually were responsible for building these bodies, right? So technically, the Anunnaki were the creators of these human forms. Okay? So there's two distinct things going on here. Now, if you think you're a human form and that's all you are, then your creator is the Anunnaki. Okay? Now, there's still folks here that serve the Anunnaki, because the Anunnaki weren't evil. Okay? They weren't evil. They were just setting up an amusement park, and that's what's going on here. And it's a useful amusement park, because we're learning stuff here. Experiencing stuff that we wouldn't otherwise did if we would have been left alone, because the indigenous creatures here weren't involving the kind of special tools that we have, and the Anunnaki actually split our brain down through the center, and we have two halves of consciousness, left and right. One's duality, that creates the idea that we're separate, and then the other side is unity on the right side, which is we're all one being. All right, and that's the being part. Okay, so they set the tool up very specifically, and the DNA allowed a whole host of different types of beings to actually inhabit these bodies and all call themselves human. Okay, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, because they're all in this suit, nothing special, right? But the Anunnaki, left some folks here that were basically running the game, right, making sure everything was okay and making sure it didn't get out of control. And those people are largely responsible for making sure that things don't just get out of control to where the Earth is completely destroyed and all of the humans are killed. That doesn't mean that humans aren't killed, because that's part of the fun. But they just made sure that it didn't just go out of control. So the Anunnaki, or the children of An, and I use the word An symbol, that was coincidental.
So I thought that was kind of interesting that it was coincidental, um, because there's nothing happens by accident. So they set up these tools. We're living in them, and we're experiencing them. So they're trying to get us back under control, right? So the stewards of society, by order of the Unum Sanctum, a papal bull in 1302 from Pope Boniface, basically says, okay, you guys are property of the church. Okay, you're insane. We're going to tell you what to do, and that's just the way the power goes. So they had these people that were beings, and of course they were liberating people that really didn't have the kind of responsibility to be beings. Um, they just said they're free. I'm going to do whatever I want as long as I don't hurt anybody. Of course, there wasn't the same level of responsibility that a being would have. So it was a dangerous. It was, well, not really dangerous, but it could be viewed as dangerous to have a bunch of people who are not responsible, who are, exercising rights like that. That's not a good situation. It becomes very confusing for people. So in an effort to actually do that, the Declaration of Independence, actually, that separation between, the supreme God of nature and the Creator. Now, what that did is those that knew what they were as beings knew that, hey, their Creator was the one being that's all doing this. Right? That's their creator, because they don't identify with this suit. I'm not this flesh body. I'm the thing that's looking out of the eyes. That's not this body. This is a disposable suit. But the others that are saying, my creator. Oh, okay. Well, they thought they were talking about, you know, the supreme being, but that's not what those words said. It said their creator, but they didn't know the difference. So very cleverly, they could manipulate perception to where people want to actually bind themselves back into to human form, at least, right? To staying in human form, and then slowly, what they were going to do is migrate us back into a person entity. All right, and at that point, they created the republic. I have to say that republic was dead on arrival, and the reason it was dead on arrival is because there were two glaring problems. One, a foreign-owned central bank was in control of the money supply. That was a direct, glaring violation of the Constitution. The other thing was that there were agents of foreign powers actually serving in the state and national legislature and in government as judges and stuff like that, and that was not permitted under the Constitution. So it was only a matter of time before the republic is going to go away. Most especially because most of the people were still human, and they weren't beings, and there just weren't enough beings to actually maintain the republic. So it all culminated with the fact that it all culminated in March of 1861. Now, the problem was this. When the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution was written, there was no expectation that one man owning another as property was going to be maintained, right? So they had about 20 years, and at the War of 1812, that's basically when the control really started getting exerted. Now we all think we won that war, but really the only thing that was there was the flag. They forced the bank back on us, and they forced the foreign agents, and slavery was still going on. Now, we needed to know why it wasn't a good idea for one man to own another man as property. And more importantly, we needed to know why it's not a good idea for you to place yourself as property of another. Okay, both carry very severe consequences, most especially for those who decide that they're going to choose to do that. Okay, so we had to learn that. Now, in March of 1861, what happened was the states, the Union states at the time of the Union of the United States, the southern states had in their constitutions, and it was a lawful constitution, and that what the Constitution set up was a trust document whereby trustees could do certain things without retribution from the general population, like form a government or negotiate overseas, raise armies, and do all of that. that government stuff. But it was supposed to be at a minimum because most of the power were actually the states. It was sort of like the EU where you have a bunch of different countries that just get together and just call themselves one trading bloc. I mean, it was sort of like that. But the EU now is starting to become heavily oppressive, and it's becoming like the United States now. So pretty soon your national boundaries and all of the independence that you think you have is going to go away, because that's not what they're going to do here. So in March of 1861, these Union states, which were the lawful states, and they had a lawful contract in real natural law, and a citizen of a citizen was actually a citizen of the several states. So if you were from Tennessee, then you were from Tennessee. Then that's where your constitutional rights were protected. And it really, what it does is just kept the government's trustees from actually overstepping the authority that they were granted. Right? And that government was done by the consent of the people. Everybody agreed to it. Therefore, it was a lawful trust or a lawful contract. Right? And the rights were protected under state citizenship. So there really wasn't a citizen of the United States then. It was only citizens of one of the several states. So you were either from Tennessee or you were from Maryland or Virginia, and that's where your rights were protected. And that was the contract. Now, the southern states, in their state constitution, and they were like independent countries, they decided that, we don't like what the northern states are doing to us. They're subjecting us to unlawful tariffs, and they are attempting to steal from us. They're manipulating the markets, and the northern states really aren't defending us. So they said, well, you know what, this isn't working out for us. And they had it in their state constitutions to leave the Union at any time. Now, the issue with the United States was that it was all or none proposition. So either all the states were agreed, or none, or there was no republic. All right, so the southern states said, okay, you know what, we've had enough. So in March of 1861, the southern states removed their representatives from the national government. Said, you know what, we're not participating anymore. Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day. So they walked out, and the session was adjourned, what's called sine die, which means without a day. Now, under the rules, the lawful rules of parliamentary procedure at the time, they were required to get those southern states' representatives voluntarily back into the legislature, and then vote on a day, reestablish the quorum, and then vote on a day to hold another lawful session of Congress. Well, that didn't happen, and it hasn't happened. Okay, so it presented a big problem. All of a sudden, the republic was gone. Right? It was done. It was busted. Right? President Lincoln wasn't president anymore because the people had willingly decided to disband it. So on his own authority, he decided to declare martial law, and then he got together some northern troops and do that. Now this happened because, men hadn't learned the lesson that you don't own one man as another man. But technically it was because the southern states had it in their constitution to secede. Well, in the interim time, we decided to have a war and all kinds of discomfort, and, Americans were killing Americans. And the worst part of it was that the northern state generals were moving through the South and just raping and murdering and pillaging the cities in the South. So the civilian population really suffered in that. And they, of course, they made such a mess of it that the civilian population really wasn't interested in being part of the United States anymore. Right? So the problem is the northern states says, hey, we can't reestablish a consensual government anymore. That's a problem. They had forced, and in the northern states, the northern armies, the Union armies, had forced the southern states. They'd forced their own representation in there, right? And that was against the consent of the people, right? So consensual government was out the window, which presented a huge problem. So they went through this thing called Reconstruction, and they were looking for ways to actually reestablish the Union, and it went on for 10 years. So in 1871, 10 years later, through something called the Act of 1871, they went to France, and France was still a sovereign country, and they created this corporation called the United States of America. Sound familiar? Well, the United States of America was all capital letters, and it was basically a corporation. You know, one of those bodies that's a piece of paper, right? It's a corporation, it had a board of directors. Of course, we don't know who those are. You don't know who those people are. And then what it did was, because there were no more union states, they created all of these subsidiary corporations called federal states. Now, the way this works is, before it was man had the most power, then state, and then the national government. And that's how the power went. So the government couldn't overstep state rights, and states couldn't overstep a man's right. And the man was right. As long as he wasn't hurting anyone, everything was okay. So what they did was, when they went to France, they inverted that pyramid, right? So then they created a huge corporation called the United States of America, and two entities can't have the same name. So what they did is they changed it by making it all capital letters. And they conveniently left off the incorporated at the end so people would get confused. Right? So then they had to create things called federal states, right, which were subsidiary corporations. So the federal government then tells the subsidiary corporations what to do, and then they created something called person. Okay, and these were subsidiary corporate offices within the state, right? And it was all fiction. It was all pieces of paper. It was all in people's mind, and it wasn't done by with the consent of the people. However, they didn't go and tell everybody that that's what was actually going on, because if the people would have really known what was going on, I imagine that they would have put a stop to it. So what they did is they decided to pretend for a while. We'll just pretend that it's the old republic. So, not to, and we'll just go through several generations that way, and then slowly we'll gradually, restore it to the way we want. And so that's what they did. Now, in order to do that, they had to create these entities, right? So there wasn't any union states. So union states were the places where your rights as a human being were actually protected. Well, specifically a human. But federal states couldn't do that because there were fictions that existed only in people's minds. So they had to create these entities called persons, right? And they created these federal states, right? And they said, okay, what they did was, if you look at the 14th Amendment, which wasn't ratified because you couldn't ratify it because you didn't have the consent of the people. So there wasn't anything after 1861 that was truly lawful. Okay, it changed from public law to public policy. Right? So the 14th Amendment says, okay, anyone who is a citizen of the several states is a citizen of the United States and subject to its jurisdiction, which makes perfect sense, right? So if you claim that you're a citizen of a subsidiary corporation, well, of course the parent corporation would have authority over it because, it created the federal states. The federal states then created the office of person. And if you don't know anybody better and you say, hey, I'm a citizen of the several states, you become that person. And of course the laws apply to the person, but you don't know any better because you just put yourself into a dead object, a piece of paper, a dead object. You're not living anymore. And it's okay, a dead object can do anything, break the law, do anything they want, and then these guys can write all the laws they want, and it all applies to the person, but if you don't know any better, you're going to be doing it. Just a choice. All right, so this is what happened, and that went on for until 1913. And, I don't know why 1913 was so important, but, curiously enough, it was long enough for the name United States to lapse in copyright. All right, so nobody was using the United States. They were using the United States of America, but they weren't using the United States. So in 1913, because of a flaw in the Constitution, of course, the Constitution was a dead document. That trust was busted, but they were still pretending to do that. But, they had this plot of land, and it was called Washington, D.C., and nobody owned it. I mean, it had its own government, and there were people living in there, had its own government. Now, that actually qualifies as a separate country. So that's what they did, and they created a new country, and they called it New Columbia. That was its registered name, but they just went by the name United States of America. right? Or United States, because they could use that name now because the copyright had lapsed on it. So now you had a new little country inside of a country. So then you had these states over. Then you had these people. Through corporate contract. Anybody who said that they were a citizen of the several states or claimed to be a United States citizen, because that was getting to be useful now to say that, because U.S. citizen didn't exist before 1871. So they were slowly binding people under the authority of this little government, this little country called the United States of America. So any of the citizens of the several states who claimed to be a U.S. citizen had just voluntarily given away all of their rights as a human being and rights as a human. Okay, and then they had placed themselves in the office of person. Okay, now that was willing. And that is a choice. And it's voluntary. Right? Because if you don't know the difference, right? If you don't know the difference. Now there's a matter of fraud here. Okay? But I'll tell you what. If we would have actually done our diligence and actually paid attention, then everybody would have known what was going on. Right? It was right there in front of everybody's faces, but after generations and generations of pretending that the Republic was still here, and they still pretend. I mean, there's still people out there pretending that the Constitution actually has force and law here, and it doesn't. It doesn't. Now, there's a Supreme Court that rules and judges against the Constitution, but okay, that's fine. It's academic, because most of the people here, the Constitution doesn't apply. Now, which was pretty curious, because there was a guy named Aaron Russo, and unfortunately Aaron Russo has died. He died of cancer. And he made a movie called Freedom to Fascism. And he thought that the Constitution was still law. Okay, but the people actually, the grantor of the trust, actually disbanded the trust. And it's not law. Even though these guys might swear to it, the people didn't grant them the authority. So this is our confusion. This is how we fool ourselves, right? So Aaron Russo is talking to a former director of the IRS, right? And the IRS actually tells him the truth, right? The IRS guy tells him, when Aaron says, yeah, but that's a violation of the Constitution, and the director says, the Constitution doesn't apply. Now, the guy at the IRS actually told Aaron Russo the truth. But Aaron Russo didn't understand, right? And in fact, David Rockefeller tried to bring him in and educate him, but Aaron wasn't listening. Aaron wasn't listening. Not only that, but then Aaron got all mad and decided that all of these guys were enemies, when really they were trying to help him. And then he makes this movie, and at the end, it's just it's like, these evil traitors, we got to get them, we got to take our country back. And we got to do this, and all it is goading people into some sort of violent action, when really all they need to do is understand what happened, and then they understand that all of the suffering that we've been going through are these people trying to teach us. This is okay. If you want to do that, if you want to choose to be that way, we're going to let you, and you're not going to like it, and maybe you'll choose to be a being. But most people didn't haven't been doing that. There was another guy that actually really good at telling the truth. It was George Bush Jr. And he said that the Constitution was just and I quote, a goddamn piece of paper. He's telling you the truth, right? Okay, so we got wingnuts out there saying, traitor, criminal. He's not a traitor. Who's he betraying? He works for the corporation or the United States of America. I mean, he's not bound by any Constitution. If you don't believe me, look at government right now. Are they? Are they bound to a Constitution? Are any of those rights in the Constitution actually protected? I mean, it's right there in front of your face. We need to ask a question. Why is that? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Why don't we understand what's going on? See, that's the problem. See, they're not taking anything away from us. George Bush is actually performing a service, and everybody thinks he's some sort of criminal. No, he's not. He's trying to help you. He's trying to teach you something. But you know what? Most people can't accept it because they want to blame somebody else. Oh, it's those evil guys over there. They're doing. Oh, it's them reptilian aliens. You know? Oh, we've got to fight. We got to kill. We got to do this. You know? We got to throw them out and hang them by their necks. No, We're not talking about traitors. We're just talking about people doing business. Right? And since we are confused, right? We're not in a state. There's not enough people being right now to where we can actually have lawful government. So we're going to get what we get what you know what we're capable of handling. And right now we're capable of handling being told what to do, cradle to grave, every moment of our lives by people that really want to do nothing more than make us uncomfortable. We call that the American dream. Now, if you don't like that, then you're free to actually find these things out for yourself. You don't have to listen to me. You go prove it to yourself. I've actually watched judges show me and demonstrate these things to me, and they were happy to do that. And you know what? At no time did I have to resort to any violence. Did I have to resist what they were doing? It was just a learning process. You know, the cops are not there to hurt you unless you don't do what you're told. Right? And the reason you do what you're told is because you don't know when you voluntarily placed yourself under their authority. See, because if you don't know this stuff that I'm talking to you about, then you're ignorant, and you're ignorant of the law. That's why they get to tell you what to do. And it comes back to unum sanctum. If you're nuts and insane or incompetent, then the church or you know the Jewish hierarchy, they take care of their irresponsible people, and you know, maybe the Amish, they take care of their irresponsible people too. So one of the things though that was missing is we've gone along here so long that there was nobody left to actually explain these things to us, and even the people who were telling everybody what to do didn't even know. Right? And this is the state we're in right now, because you know, one of the problems that I have is I meet people that have no clue. Right? These are people that should know but have no idea. So it's my responsibility to help them know the law, right? So they don't hurt themselves, right? Because I'm not irresponsible, but they're still acting irresponsibly because they don't know the law. They don't know that, you know, injuring me or taking stuff from me against my will is actually against the law, right? Because they think they have a piece of paper that says that's okay. But it's not okay, and there's consequences. And I'd say, hey, you know, let me help you. Let me help you. I'll protect you. And this is where I'm at right now. So now I've got people out there that are actually going to my website, finding the materials, and learning the law. And they're becoming beings again. And there's quite a few of them out there. And things are changing because that's what we're doing. So the primary element here is my function is to remind people what the law is and what the architecture is, and so they can stop being human and actually be human beings. At which point then everybody becomes responsible, then everybody becomes peaceful, and there's no need for conflict because we are all of one mind, and we all want to be happy. So I mean, you know, you beating somebody up or hitting somebody or taking their stuff or lying to them or taking their wives or husbands, that's not necessary because that's not what responsible people do. Okay, so until we decide that we're going to be responsible and we're going to be a being and know what that means and actually go through that transition state. And look, hey, if you don't know how to do it, just hit my website, right? I got a fast track page on there. You just hit that, you just go through that material, and if you have any questions, right, you let me know. It's actually really easy. All right, mechanically it's really easy. Really, really easy. What makes it hard is getting over the fear part. Okay, that's what makes it hard. Okay, and it's like this. Well, it's like jumping off a cliff, right? Mechanically, it's pretty easy to jump off a cliff. You just relax and fall forward. However, it's that fear thing that really keeps you from doing it. Well, once you do it once, then it's okay. Then you don't have that, and you can progress. But getting to that point is really important. So, my function is to actually help that. Now, there is no need for people to just go wild and hurt, maim, resist, protest, set fires to to police cars, because the police are trying to help you, right? They are trying to help you. They're trying to protect you from yourself because you think that there's evil guys out there hurting you. And yeah, people are getting hurt. But not because of the evil guys, but because they've simply made a decision to be hurt. And all the government is doing is honoring your wish. You've chosen to be that way. If you want to be irresponsible, then you're going to be hurt. Right? Why protest a government that doesn't have any real, true, lawful authority over you? Why? Why bother? Right? In the whole act of protesting, aren't you telling the government that they have jurisdiction over you? Why are you protesting something that doesn't have power over you? So they set it up to be impossible to obey all of these colorable laws. Why? To get you to wake up and make this decision, right? So you think it's a surprise that you go and protest, or even peacefully, when it's the job of the protectors to actually, hey, wait a minute, no, you're doing it wrong, Here, let me help you. Let me put some knots on your head, and maybe that'll get it. Maybe that'll help you. And that's what they do. So if you think you need more bumps on your head, if your head's too smooth and it's just unsightly, then go and protest a government that doesn't have any lawful authority over you. Yeah, go out there, just make a stink and yell and scream, because until we actually peacefully just get together, decide we're going to be beings, right, and say, hey, do we really need the government in this form? And I'm not. And when a majority of us actually do that, and we are by no means in that place. And as a being, you can watch this. Of course, there's going to be people that are human, and they're going to do stuff, and it does cause problems with you. But you got to be mature enough to be able to handle it. There's nothing to be afraid of. Yeah, it may hurt. Yeah, you may be deprived of certain things, but again, the life experience proceeds the way it's supposed to proceed for maximum benefit. All right, you can complain about it if you want. It ain't going to change it. Right? You can embrace it and actually pay attention. If you pay attention, then you're going to learn something from it. Right? So this is my effort. Now, I've been bumping up against people who believe the government has power and has the lawful authority, and they're just ignorant of the law, and that's all. And they may not be able to listen to me, but that's okay. That's okay. And if they put me in a cage, then they put me in a cage. Or if they take all my stuff, then they'll take all my stuff. And I'll just watch, and it's okay. I don't have to resist them, right? I don't have to resist them, but I don't have to consent. And as long as I say, I don't consent to this, I'm not going to resist you, right? But I don't consent to this. And you won't make me consent. Now, if you want my consent, then you're not going to you're going to do things that I want you to do, and we'll come to an agreement. But if you're just going to force yourself on me, then I'm going to let you, because I don't want to hurt you, okay? Because you're insane and you don't know what you're doing, okay? But I'm not going to be the cause of your discomfort. You are. So if I resist, I'm not going to give you that power, okay? But if you want my consent, I'm sorry, you don't have it, because I'm a being. I'm not a human. If you want to make this human form do things, then you go ahead. But that's a violation. Why? Because this human form is mine and not yours. The being has responsibility over this suit, not you. The being in here is a responsible, competent, sane being. It doesn't commit crime. It doesn't injure everybody, and it has a responsibility and duty to make sure that those people who are not beings, who are humans or persons, do not hurt themselves. One day, we're going to stop doing that. And that's happening really quick. Right? Now, this is part of it. So you spread this around, people will start asking questions. Maybe they'll think about where they're at and what they're doing here. Maybe a whole new world is coming. Maybe there's going to be a consciousness shift. Maybe everybody's going to start being conscious and paying attention. Because remember, that's truly The only requirement for being here. That's the only thing that you have to pay, and is to pay attention. The suit, the suit does what the suit does. No fear, no problems, no conflict, no need for stress. It's like a documentary. It doesn't have to be the horror movie. It could be a documentary, something interesting to watch. And there's nothing more interesting for me than watching natural law in flawless execution. Because when you know the law, you see why things happen. Not that they happen, but why. Because there's a purpose and a reason for everything. I'm Roge, in the woodshed. You have a good day.